Jamal Williams adjusted the strap of his worn leather satchel as he approached the towering glass doors of Veritas Art Gallery, the most renowned gallery in the city. The polished surface of the door reflected his determined face, framed by locks of jet black hair that he'd tied back into a loose bun. This was his chance, his opportunity to show his work to someone who could elevate it to the next level. Inside, the gallery was a pristine space of white walls and gleaming floors, adorned with modern art pieces that screamed opulence. Each painting and sculpture was accompanied by a gold-plated tag, bearing names that Jamal had only read about in art magazines. A hushed reverence filled the air as wealthy patrons wandered, sipping champagne and murmuring their critiques. Jamal's hands tightened around the strap of his satchel, which held samples of his latest works, paintings that spoke of his journey, his struggles, and the vibrant culture of his Harlem upbringing. He was no stranger to rejection, but he believed his art was undeniable. Today, he'd make someone see it. Behind the sleek marble counter stood Richard Beaumont, the gallery owner. Dressed in a tailored gray suit with a crimson pocket square, Richard exuded an air of superiority. His every movement, from the way he adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses to the way he glanced at people, suggested he believed himself a gatekeeper of the art world. Jamal took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Beaumont?" Richard turned slowly, his eyes scanning Jamal from head to toe. His gaze lingered on Jamal's scuffed shoes, his denim jacket, and his satchel. His lips curled into a thin, dismissive smile. "Yes?" Richard's tone was clipped, impatient. "I'm Jamal Williams, an artist," Jamal began, his voice steady, despite the slight tremor in his hands. "I wanted to see if you'd be interested in showcasing some of my work here. I brought samples." Richard raised a hand, cutting him off. "Let me stop you right there, Mr. Williams." He gestured around the room. "This gallery is reserved for established artists with proven sales records, not amateurs off the street." Jamal felt the sting of those words, but refused to back down. "I understand that, sir, but if you could just take a look at my work, I think you'd see it has potential." Richard chuckled, a sound that was more condescending than amused. "Potential? That's the word every hobbyist uses. Look around you, Mr. Williams. Do you see any potential hanging on these walls, or do you see brilliance? Excellence?" Jamal clenched his fists. "I see a lot of talent, but I also know that everyone starts somewhere. Even Picasso wasn't Picasso until someone gave him a chance." "Picasso?" Richard smirked, shaking his head. "How quaint. Let me save you some time, young man. Your kind of art isn't what our clientele is looking for." Jamal's heart sank. "My kind of art?" Richard's expression hardened, his meaning unmistakable. "Yes, your kind. Let's leave it at that." For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. Jamal stood there, his jaw tight, his mind racing. He wanted to argue, to force this man to see the value in his work, but he realized it was pointless. Richard had already decided he wasn't worth the effort. "I see," Jamal said finally, his voice low but firm. "Thank you for your time." As Jamal turned to leave, a young woman who had been arranging flowers near the counter glanced up. Her expression was sympathetic, almost apologetic. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but stopped when Richard shot her a warning glare. Jamal stepped out of the gallery and into the bustling city street. The noise of honking cars and chattering pedestrians surrounded him, but all he could hear was Richard's dismissive tone echoing in his mind. He walked aimlessly for a while, replaying the encounter and feeling the familiar weight of frustration. Yet, beneath the hurt and anger, a spark of determination began to grow. "This isn't over," he muttered to himself. Back in his modest apartment, surrounded by unfinished canvases and the scent of turpentine, Jamal pulled out the pieces he'd intended to show Richard. One by one, he examined them, searching for flaws, questioning whether they were as good as he believed. But as he stared at the bold strokes and vibrant colors, the stories they told came rushing back to him, stories of resilience, community, and hope. These were more than paintings, they were pieces of his soul. The rejection at Veritas had been a setback, but it wasn't the end. If Richard Beaumont wouldn't give him a chance, Jamal would find another way to make his voice heard. He grabbed his sketchpad and began jotting down ideas. A pop-up exhibit? Social media? Collaborations with local businesses? The possibilities were endless, and Jamal was ready to explore them all. The next morning, he began his plan in earnest, contacting community centers, cafes, and small galleries in Harlem. He started documenting his process on Instagram, sharing videos of himself painting and explaining the stories behind his work. Slowly but surely, people began to take notice. Meanwhile, at Veritas, Richard continued to operate as he always had, blissfully unaware of the ripple effects his rejection had set in motion. Unbeknownst to him, the man he had mocked was on the verge of becoming the very artist who would challenge everything he thought he knew about art, success, and value. Jamal Williams woke up to the soft morning light filtering through his apartment window, his small studio, still heavy with the smell of paint and turpentine. The rejection from Veritas Art Gallery lingered in his mind, but rather than discouragement, it fueled his determination. He wasn't going to let one arrogant gallery owner dictate his fate. Sitting at his cluttered desk, Jamal flipped through his sketchbook, tracing his journey as an artist. Each sketch was a memory, a story waiting to be told. He knew he had something unique to offer. His art wasn't just paint on canvas, it was life, culture, and resilience distilled into every brushstroke. It was time to show the world. The first step, a pop-up exhibit. Jamal decided to take matters into his own hands. If the traditional art world wouldn't welcome him, he'd carve his own path. He reached out to local businesses in Harlem, pitching the idea of hosting a pop-up art exhibit. Your cafe could be more than just a place for coffee, he told the owner of a popular coffee shop, Java Junction. It could be a community space where people experience something new. My art could help draw more people in. The owner, a kind-hearted woman named Denise, was intrigued. She agreed to let Jamal display his work on a quiet Saturday afternoon. Jamal spent the next week preparing for the event, meticulously selecting pieces that told his story, vivid paintings of bustling cityscapes, soulful portraits, and abstract expressions of joy and struggle. The day of the exhibit, Jamal arrived early to set up. He carefully hung his paintings on the exposed brick walls of the cafe and arranged smaller pieces on easels. Denise helped him create a cozy ambience, complete with soft jazz music playing in the background. As customers trickled in, they were drawn to Jamal's work. Some paused mid-sip to admire a vibrant painting of a Harlem street scene. Others struck up conversations with Jamal, captivated by the stories he shared about his inspirations. By the end of the day, Jamal had sold 3 pieces and gained a handful of followers on Instagram. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a start. More importantly, it gave him the confidence to keep going. Building momentum, the power of social media. Inspired by the success of his pop-up exhibit, Jamal decided to leverage social media to reach a wider audience. He began posting videos of his creative process, sharing time-lapse clips of him painting and short narratives about the meaning behind each piece. At first, his posts only garnered a few likes and comments, but Jamal didn't let that discourage him. He remained consistent, engaging with his small audience and collaborating with local photographers to create visually striking content. His authenticity and passion resonated with people, and slowly but surely, his following grew. One day, Jamal received a direct message that would change everything. It was from Sophia Martinez, a respected art critic and blogger known for discovering emerging talent. Hi Jamal, the message read. I stumbled across your work on Instagram and I'm blown away. I'd love to feature you in my blog's Artist Spotlight series. Are you interested? Jamal's heart raced as he typed his response. Absolutely. Thank you for considering me. Within a week, Sophia published a glowing feature on Jamal, describing his art as a raw, vibrant testament to the human spirit. The article included high-resolution photos of his work, as well as a link to his Instagram page. Almost overnight, Jamal's following tripled, and inquiries about his paintings flooded his inbox. the breakthrough, an invitation to a prestigious show. As Jamal's reputation grew, so did his opportunities. He received an invitation to participate in a local art festival, where his work would be showcased alongside established artists. The festival was a major event, attracting art collectors, critics, and enthusiasts from across the city. Jamal poured every ounce of his energy into preparing for the show. He created a new series of paintings that reflected his personal journey, pieces that told the story of resilience in the face of adversity. Each canvas was alive with color and emotion, a visual representation of his belief that art could bridge divides and spark conversations. The festival was a resounding success. Jamal's booth was one of the most visited, with attendees captivated by his work and his story. A prominent collector purchased 2 of his pieces, and several others expressed interest in commissioning custom artwork. Among the crowd was an unexpected face, the young woman who had been arranging flowers at Veritas Art Gallery during Jamal's ill-fated visit. She introduced herself as Clara, an intern at the gallery. "Your work is incredible," Clara said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "I'm so sorry about how Mr. Beaumont treated you." "He was wrong." Jamal smiled warmly. "Thank you, Clara. I appreciate that." Clara handed him her card. "If you ever need anything, let me know. I believe in what you're doing." A rising star. With his newfound recognition, Jamal's career began to soar. Art magazines and blogs featured his work, and his paintings were soon displayed in galleries across the city, not just in Harlem but in prominent spaces downtown. His pieces were selling for thousands of dollars, and his name was becoming synonymous with innovation and authenticity in the art world. Despite his success, Jamal remained grounded. He continued to give back to his community, hosting workshops for young aspiring artists and using his platform to advocate for diversity and inclusion in the art world. While Jamal's star rose, Veritas Art Gallery struggled to maintain its relevance. Richard Beaumont's rigid approach and elitist attitude alienated younger, more progressive patrons. The gallery's sales declined, and its events grew increasingly sparse. Unbeknownst to Richard, the artist he had dismissed and mocked was not only thriving but was on the verge of becoming a force to be reckoned with in the art world. Jamal Williams adjusted the cuff of his tailored blazer as he stepped into the brightly lit convention center, the air buzzing with excitement. The annual citywide art expo was one of the most prestigious events of the year, drawing collectors, critics, and art enthusiasts from all over the country. For Jamal, this moment represented the culmination of years of hard work, perseverance, and self-belief. A massive banner adorned the entrance, listing the names of all the featured artists. Jamal's name was prominently displayed alongside industry heavyweights, a sight that filled him with both pride and humility. He was no longer the struggling artist who had been dismissed by the likes of Richard Beaumont. He was a recognized talent, a rising star who had earned his place through sheer determination. The expo and the spotlight. Jamal's booth was strategically placed near the heart of the exhibit hall, its vibrant display of paintings drawing an immediate crowd. Each piece in his new collection told a story: urban landscapes imbued with nostalgia, abstract works evoking resilience, and portraits that radiated raw emotion. His art was a magnet, pulling people in and sparking conversation. As Jamal spoke with attendees, explaining the inspiration behind his pieces, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. Sophia Martinez, the art critic whose blog feature had been instrumental in his rise, approached with a warm smile. "Jamal," Sophia greeted, extending her hand. "It's amazing to see how far you've come. Your booth is the talk of the expo." "Thank you, Sophia. I owe a lot of that to you," Jamal replied sincerely. Their conversation was interrupted by a well-dressed man in his mid-50s. His silver hair and sharp suit exuded wealth and influence. "Excuse me," the man said, addressing Jamal. "I'm Lawrence Mitchell, a collector. I've been following your work, and I must say, I'm impressed." Jamal shook Lawrence's hand, masking his surprise. This was the Lawrence Mitchell, a legendary collector whose acquisitions shaped the careers of countless artists. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell," Jamal said. "It's an honor to hear that." I'm interested in purchasing this piece, Lawrence said, pointing to a bold, abstract painting titled Roots of Resilience. And I'd like to discuss a potential partnership. Your work belongs in spaces far beyond this expo. Jamal nodded, his heart racing. I'd love that. Let's set up a meeting. As Lawrence walked away, Jamal took a moment to absorb the gravity of what had just happened. A partnership with someone like Lawrence Mitchell could catapult his career to unimaginable heights. Richard's growing desperation. Meanwhile, across town, Richard Beaumont sat in his office at Veritas Art Gallery, glaring at the latest sales report. It was abysmal. The once thriving gallery was hemorrhaging clients and revenue, unable to compete with the fresh, dynamic spaces that had emerged in recent years. Richard sipped his scotch, his frustration mounting. He had dismissed these new galleries as fads, but now they were dominating the scene. Worse, his exclusive clientele, once his greatest asset, had begun to abandon him in favor of younger, more inclusive curators. Clara, the gallery intern, entered with a hesitant knock. Mr. Beaumont, I think you should see this. She handed him a glossy art magazine, open to an article titled The Art World's New Vanguard. Richard's eyes narrowed as he scanned the page, his breath catching when he saw Jamal's name. Jamal Williams, he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. The article detailed Jamal's meteoric rise, his innovative approach, and his ability to connect with a diverse audience. It also mentioned his upcoming solo show at the Bright Horizons Gallery, a space Richard had once considered a rival but now viewed as untouchable. This is the same man who walked into my gallery with that ridiculous satchel, Richard scoffed, throwing the magazine onto his desk. Yes, Clara said, her tone measured. And now his work is worth millions. Maybe we should. Enough, Richard snapped. I don't need advice from an intern. Clara left the room, her expression a mix of disappointment and resolve. She had seen the shift in the art world and recognized the potential for change, but Richard was too blinded by his arrogance to adapt. Jamal's big move. As Jamal's star continued to rise, he began to think about his long-term goals. Success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about creating opportunities for others like him, artists who were overlooked and dismissed because they didn't fit the traditional mold. One day, while walking through his old neighborhood, Jamal noticed a vacant building. It was directly adjacent to Veritas Art Gallery. An idea began to take shape. After weeks of negotiations, Jamal purchased the building and transformed it into a vibrant, inclusive space called the Collective Canvas. The gallery was unlike anything the city had seen, featuring a rotating roster of emerging artists from underrepresented backgrounds. The grand opening of the Collective Canvas was a star-studded event, attended by collectors, critics, and influencers. The energy was electric, with live music, spoken-word performances, and, of course, stunning artwork. As the night unfolded, Jamal couldn't help but notice Richard Beaumont standing outside Veritas, watching the crowd pour into the Collective Canvas. His face was a mask of disbelief and barely concealed envy. The confrontation. A week later, Richard, driven by desperation, paid an unannounced visit to Jamal's gallery. He was greeted by a receptionist who led him to Jamal's office. Jamal looked up from his desk. Surprised but unsurprised to see Richard standing in the doorway. Mr. Beaumont, he said, his tone neutral. What brings you here? Richard forced a tight smile. Jamal, let's put the past behind us. I came to discuss a potential collaboration. I believe our galleries could benefit from working together. Jamal leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Collaboration? That's interesting, considering how you treated me when I first walked into your gallery. Richard's smile faltered. That was a misunderstanding. I didn't realize. You didn't realize my worth, Jamal interjected. You judged me based on my appearance and dismissed my work without giving it a chance. Richard shifted uncomfortably. I admit I was mistaken. But I'm here now, offering an olive branch. Jamal stood, his eyes locking with Richard's. This isn't just about me, Mr. Beaumont. It's about every artist you've dismissed, every opportunity you've denied, because of your narrow vision. Richard bristled. Are you saying you're unwilling to forgive? Jamal paused, then said, forgiveness is one thing. Trust is another. If you're serious about change, prove it. Open your gallery to diverse artists. Partner with organizations that support emerging talent. Show the world that you're willing to grow. Richard's face hardened. You think you're in a position to lecture me? I think I've earned the right, Jamal said calmly. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, Richard turned on his heel and walked out without another word. As the door closed behind him, Jamal felt a sense of closure. He hadn't just confronted Richard, he had reclaimed his power. The morning sun streamed through the wide glass windows of the collective canvas, illuminating the bustling gallery. Jamal Williams stood near the entrance, greeting visitors with a warm smile as they walked in. His new space had quickly become a beacon of inclusivity and innovation in the art world, attracting a diverse crowd of patrons, artists, and critics. Across the street, the scene was starkly different. Veritas Art Gallery, once the epitome of prestige and exclusivity, was eerily quiet. Richard Beaumont stood in the shadows of his empty space, watching as crowds flocked to Jamal's gallery. The jealousy and frustration that had been simmering since his visit to the collective canvas now boiled over. A thriving community. Inside Jamal's gallery, the energy was palpable. The walls were adorned with a wide array of art, abstracts, portraits, and sculptures, all created by emerging artists from diverse backgrounds. Jamal had deliberately curated a rotating lineup of talent, ensuring every exhibit told a unique story. One such artist was Maya Carter, a young woman whose surrealist paintings explored themes of mental health and healing. Maya had been struggling to gain recognition until Jamal invited her to display her work at the collective canvas. I can't thank you enough, Maya said to Jamal during a quiet moment at the exhibit. This is the first time I've felt seen as an artist. Jamal smiled. Your work deserves to be seen, Maya. This gallery isn't just about me, it's about creating space for artists like you to thrive. The gallery's success was undeniable. Major collectors had begun frequenting the space, and several pieces had already been sold for impressive sums. The buzz surrounding the collective canvas had even caught the attention of mainstream media, with journalists hailing it as a revolutionary force in the art world. Richard's desperation. Across the street, Richard Beaumont's frustration reached a breaking point. Veritas Art Gallery had seen a sharp decline in sales and foot traffic over the past year. Richard had refused to adapt to the changing art landscape, clinging to his outdated practices and elitist attitudes. His remaining clients were growing restless, demanding fresh perspectives and innovative artists, things Richard had steadfastly refused to embrace. Now, with the collective canvas thriving, his refusal was costing him everything. Richard spent his days in his office, poring over financial reports that painted a grim picture. His gallery was hemorrhaging money, and several of his staff had already left to work at Jamal's gallery or other progressive spaces. Clara, the intern who had once tried to warn Richard about Jamal's potential, was now a rising curator at the collective canvas. Her success was yet another reminder of Richard's failure to evolve. The offer. One afternoon, Richard walked across the street and entered the collective canvas. The vibrant energy of the space hit him immediately, a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere of his own gallery. Jamal spotted him and walked over, his expression neutral. Mr. Beaumont. This is a surprise. Richard hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Jamal, I came to talk. Jamal gestured toward a small seating area in the corner of the gallery. Let's talk. As they sat down, Richard struggled to find the right words. He hated being in this position, but his desperation outweighed his pride. I'll be honest, Richard began. My gallery is struggling. The industry is changing, and I can't ignore it any longer. I need help. Jamal raised an eyebrow. And you think I'm the one to help you? You've built something incredible here, Richard admitted, glancing around the bustling gallery. I was wrong about you. I see that now. I'd like to propose a partnership. Jamal leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. A partnership? Interesting. And what would that look like? Richard cleared his throat. We could host joint exhibits, combining the prestige of Veritas with the innovative energy of the collective canvas. It could be mutually beneficial. Jamal let out a soft chuckle. You mean it could save Veritas? Richard's jaw tightened. Yes, I suppose that's true. Jamal's conditions. Jamal's tone grew serious. Let me make something clear, Mr. Beaumont. I built this gallery to challenge everything your gallery stands for: exclusion, elitism, and gatekeeping. If I were to consider any kind of collaboration, it would have to be on my terms. Richard's face hardened. And what are those terms? Jamal leaned forward. First, you open your gallery to underrepresented artists. No more catering exclusively to the elite. Second, you commit to outreach programs that support emerging talent from marginalized communities. Third, you publicly acknowledge the harm your practices have caused. Richard's face reddened. Publicly? That's a lot to ask. It's not a lot, Jamal replied firmly. It's the bare minimum. If you're not willing to make real changes, then there's no partnership. Richard stood abruptly, his fists clenched. You think you're in a position to dictate terms to me? I know I am, Jamal said calmly. This isn't about power, Mr. Beaumont. It's about doing what's right. Richard stormed out of the gallery, slamming the door behind him. A new beginning. Despite Richard's refusal to change, the confrontation left Jamal feeling more resolved than ever. He continued to expand the collective canvas, launching mentorship programs, hosting workshops, and collaborating with other galleries that shared his vision. The success of the collective canvas sparked a movement, inspiring similar spaces to open in other cities. Jamal became a leader in the art world, not just for his talent, but for his commitment to uplifting others. As for Richard, Veritas Art Gallery continued its downward spiral. His refusal to adapt ultimately led to the gallery's closure. The once proud gatekeeper of the art world became a cautionary tale of what happens when arrogance blinds you to progress. Jamal, however, thrived. His story became a symbol of resilience and empowerment, proving that when you create your own opportunities, you can not only succeed but also inspire others to do the same. Months passed since Richard Beaumont's visit to the collective canvas, and the gallery world had shifted dramatically. Jamal Williams had become a household name, not only as a brilliant artist, but also as a trailblazer who redefined what galleries could be. His story was featured in major publications, and his art adorned prestigious museums and private collections worldwide. Meanwhile, Richard's once revered Veritas Art Gallery had closed its doors. The lights went out, the polished floors grew dusty, and the nameplate on the front window became a relic of a bygone era. What had once been a hub for exclusivity and prestige was now an empty shell, much like Richard himself. A letter from the past. Jamal was in his office at the collective canvas, reviewing plans for an upcoming exhibit, when his assistant handed him an envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with the faded Veritas logo. Jamal opened it and found a handwritten letter from Richard. Dear Jamal, I've spent the past months reflecting on my actions, both as a gallery owner and as a person. Losing Veritas was humbling, but more than that, it forced me to confront truths I had ignored for far too long. You were right. I was blind to the changing world, to the potential of artists like you, and to the harm my elitist practices caused. I judged you unfairly, and for that, I owe you an apology. I see now that my gallery failed because it clung to outdated ideals. I dismissed the very diversity and innovation that are now the lifeblood of the art world. Watching your success has been both humbling and inspiring. I want to do better, and I hope you'll give me the chance to prove that. I've started working on a new initiative, a community-driven art space that provides mentorship and resources for emerging artists. It's small, but it's a step in the right direction. If you're willing, I would love to meet and discuss how we can work together to make the art world more inclusive. Sincerely, Richard Beaumont. Jamal read the letter twice, his emotions swirling. He was skeptical, but also intrigued. Could Richard truly change, or was this another desperate attempt to regain relevance? After some deliberation, Jamal decided to meet with him. The meeting. They met in a small cafe downtown. Richard arrived first, dressed in a modest gray sweater and slacks, a stark contrast to the tailored suits he once wore. He looked older, thinner, and more subdued. "Thank you for meeting me," Richard said as Jamal sat down. "I'm curious," Jamal replied. "Let's see where this goes." Richard took a deep breath. "I've made mistakes, Jamal. More than I can count. But I want to make amends. Losing Veritas was painful, but it taught me that the art world isn't about gatekeeping, it's about connection, storytelling, and growth." Jamal listened quietly, studying Richard's expression. There was no arrogance, no condescension, only humility. "What do you want from me?" Jamal asked. "I want your guidance," Richard said earnestly. "Your insight. I'm starting a new space, one that focuses on nurturing young talent, particularly from underrepresented communities. But I don't want to do it wrong again. I need someone who understands what it takes to make a real impact." Jamal leaned back, considering Richard's words. "Why now? Why should I believe this isn't just another way for you to stay relevant?" Richard's eyes met Jamal's. "Because I've lost everything else. This isn't about relevance, it's about redemption. I want to use whatever influence I have left to do something meaningful." The partnership. After much thought, Jamal agreed to a trial partnership. He would mentor Richard's efforts, but on one condition: Richard had to let the community lead the way. Together, they began work on the Open Studio project, a non-profit space where artists of all levels and backgrounds could create, learn, and showcase their work. Jamal brought in his network of collaborators and experts, while Richard provided funding and administrative support. The project quickly gained traction, becoming a hub for creativity and collaboration. Artists who had once struggled to find opportunities now had a platform, and the public responded with overwhelming enthusiasm. A new beginning for Richard. For the first time in years, Richard found himself reinvigorated. Working alongside Jamal and the community, he began to understand the true purpose of art, not as a commodity to be sold but as a bridge between people, cultures, and experiences. One day, as he watched a young artist present her first gallery piece to a cheering crowd, Richard turned to Jamal. "I never imagined art could feel this, alive." Jamal smiled. "That's because you're finally seeing it for what it is, a conversation, not a transaction." The confrontation revisited. Months later, during an event at the Open Studio project, a journalist approached Jamal and Richard for an interview. "You two started as adversaries," she said. "What changed?" Jamal replied, "Growth. Sometimes, we have to confront the worst parts of ourselves to become better." Richard was willing to do that, and I respect that. Richard nodded. "And sometimes, it takes someone like Jamal to show you the way." The interview went viral, sparking conversations about accountability, redemption, and the evolving art world. Legacy and impact. Years later, Jamal and Richard's partnership had transformed the industry. Their model of inclusive, community-driven spaces became a blueprint for galleries worldwide. Richard, now in his twilight years, often reflected on his journey. He had started as a gatekeeper and ended as a bridge builder, a legacy he was proud to leave behind. Jamal, meanwhile, continued to thrive, his art and activism reaching new heights. He often credited his success not only to his own resilience but also to the lessons learned from those who doubted him. Together, they began work on the Open Studio project, a non-profit space where artists of all levels and backgrounds could create, learn, and showcase their work. Jamal brought in his network of collaborators and experts, while Richard provided funding and administrative support. The project quickly gained traction, becoming a hub for creativity and collaboration. Artists who had once struggled to find opportunities now had a platform, and the public responded with overwhelming enthusiasm. A new beginning for Richard. For the first time in years, Richard found himself reinvigorated. Working alongside Jamal and the community, he began to understand the true purpose of art, not as a commodity to be sold but as a bridge between people, cultures, and experiences. One day, as he watched a young artist present her first gallery piece to a cheering crowd, Richard turned to Jamal. "I never imagined art could feel this, alive." Jamal smiled. "That's because you're finally seeing it for what it is, a conversation, not a transaction." The confrontation revisited. Months later, during an event at the Open Studio project, a journalist approached Jamal and Richard for an interview. "You two started as adversaries," she said. "What changed?" Jamal replied, "Growth. Sometimes, we have to confront the worst parts of ourselves to become better." Richard was willing to do that, and I respect that. Richard nodded. "And sometimes, it takes someone like Jamal to show you the way." The interview went viral, sparking conversations about accountability, redemption, and the evolving art world. Legacy and impact. Years later, Jamal and Richard's partnership had transformed the industry. Their model of inclusive, community-driven spaces became a blueprint for galleries worldwide. Richard, now in his twilight years, often reflected on his journey. He had started as a gatekeeper and ended as a bridge builder, a legacy he was proud to leave behind. Jamal, meanwhile, continued to thrive, his art and activism reaching new heights. He often credited his success not only to his own resilience but also to the lessons learned from those who doubted him. Together, they proved that even the most entrenched barriers could be dismantled when people chose growth over ego, and collaboration over competition.